And welcome back to another episode of the Astros Future podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Price, also known as Astros Future. You can find my work at astrosfuture.com. Find me on X at Astros Future.
I'm your co-host, Kenny Van Dorn.
Joining us today is overslot.com founder Joe Doyle. Welcome to the show, Joe. How you doing?
What's up, guys? Good to be. I think this is my inaugural appearance on this show. Good to meet you guys.
Yes, sir. Hopefully it won't be the last, but yeah, no. I got to say, I spent a lot of time on the mock draft simulator this year. So appreciate y'all putting that together. A ton of fun. I had to throw that out there initially. So
thank you, man. Yeah, I look forward to the iteration for 2027. That thing got like 18,000 mock drafts done on it, which kind of blew my mind. But yeah, here we are.
I might have had about like 500 or something. It was a lot. All right, Joe. Yes, there's usually two camps of people. You know, one that puts grade on classes right away, and then ones that wait a few years to kind of find out. But just for you, did you come away with a strong impression or opinion on how the Astros did with this draft class?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of both. Like I do an initial grade, and that is based on here's how much money you had, here's how you spent it, here's how you pushed money towards certain players, and then I do it again in 4 or 5 years. I just wrapped up the 2025 rewind or 2021 rewind. From the Astros perspective, I thought they did a lot of very, very good things. I thought Logan Hughes under slot was a brilliant move. That is a big leaguer. He might not ever be a star. He might not ever be a sexy name, but we're talking about a guy that's probably going to hit 265 with 20 to 25 homers. Raydell, plug and play number 4 starter. I think Wes Mendez is an excellent prospect, especially for what the Astros do so well with pitching development. My only questions on how Houston attacked this draft was how specifically they spent money on a couple of the high school players in their class. I know that those numbers haven't been released yet, so I probably won't say them on this podcast, but that was my only question. It was like, this player was probably not valued quite as high on my side as what he's going to get paid in Houston. But in any case, I thought the Astros did a very, very nice job of acquiring 1, big leaguers, 2, floor, 3, upside. And that's all you can hope for in any draft.
Joe, I told Jimmy this right before the podcast started because we were looking up just quick bio, just make sure we had everything correct on you. This is my first time seeing you without an IPA in front of your face. I think everyone knows you from Twitter with the beer, and so it's nice to put your actual face to a name.
Kenny, let me ask you a question. That has been my picture on Twitter for 7 years. I've never changed it, and I have to ask you guys the pros and cons of changing it, because literally people do know me by that camo hat and the beer in my hand. What do I do? What's your guys' advice? Do I change it? Is it time for a refresh, or do I just keep on rolling?
I would say keep rolling.
I like it. Yeah.
That's why it's still there.
Yeah.
I think it's just like when you see that, okay, this is the MLB draft guy. This is the guy who's going to tell me who's getting picked ahead of anyone else, or he's going to give me some information I can't get anywhere else. So I think unless you do a full rebrand of Over-Slot, I think you got to stick with that profile pick. You mentioned a little bit there just on Logan Hughes and what you liked about him. Right before the pick, I sent out a couple texts, a couple picks before, just saying, LeBron here, right? Like it's going to be just LeBron. I think a lot of Astros fans were thinking if he falls there, the Astros will swoop in and take him. I got a quick no, like right back. And then we all find out it's Logan Hughes. Going into that pick, maybe a couple picks before, as you're learning who's coming off the board, who were you expecting at that pick for the Astros at number 17?
I was this is not tooting my own horn. I was expecting it to be Logan Hughes if Logan Hughes was there. Everything that I had heard inside of the industry from agents, teams, everyone, who have you, is Houston wanted the best deal that they could get at 17. And I think in order for that to be Justin LeBron was going to have to take a better deal than what he got in Cincinnati. He got a good deal in Cincinnati, and I don't think Houston wanted to go that high. And you'll see what the team paid Logan Hughes. I think they're going to feel a lot better about that. And the way that they were able to spread that cash out over Keon Johnson and Bo Peterson and perhaps Jack Beck, there's some really good players coming to Houston with some serious upside. And so when you're a team like the Astros and you don't get this many opportunities to have this much money in the draft to pick this many times near the top of the draft, I think you really want to make it count. And so I think the overall goal was, 1, get a good player in the first round, but 2, spread the money out, spread the savings out. And I just think the pros and cons and the risk and reward of Logan Hughes and Justin LeBron made it a pretty simple choice when push comes to shove.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people that were a little bit worried about LeBron. We know the potential upside, but obviously the downside with maybe some swing and miss in the batting. But you kind of mentioned already Logan Hughes and your thoughts on him, but kind of circle back to Riddell and just your opinion on him. It seems like that's obviously the Astros haven't had 2 first-round picks in over a decade, and to use one on a pitcher, that's the first time they've used a first-round pick on a pitcher, I believe, since I think it might have been Bukowskis in like 2017. So
Yeah.
while since they've done that. Just what's your thoughts on him as a prospect?
Yeah, workhorse frame, big, durable, fastball slider primarily. The changeup has come a long ways. He showed it quite a bit in 2026. But, this is a guy that's probably going to be capable of throwing 180 to 190 innings at the big league level. I think if the changeup comes and it establishes itself as an above average pitch, you're talking about a potential low 3 starter. The fastball, I personally believe there's more velocity in there for Jack Riddell. I'm a little bit surprised that he kind of found himself living 93 to 95, 92 to 95. He'll reach back for 97, he'll touch a 98. But you look at that body, you look at how fast he moves, you look at the strength. I would expect Riddell is probably going to debut 95 to 96, settle in 94 to 96. So I'll say this primarily right now, he's a 2-pitch guy, but it's an above average fastball. It's an above average slider. It's field of spin. There's definitely going to be a cutter that's built into that arsenal. And like I said, I think the key for Riddell, especially when you get into these big league lineups, these advanced AA, AAA lineups where there's left-handed mashers everywhere. You don't see that when you're pitching for Notre Dame all that often. You're going to need that changeup. You're going to need that split. And I think he's going to develop it. So I think he's a true surefire plug and play number 4 starter for sure. And I do think there's some mid-rotation upside here if he can continue to develop some of those tertiary weapons.
Moving on to the next pick, the second rounder, and staying on the mound with Wes Mendez from Florida State. The Astros really haven't gone after left-handed pitchers, and we have this like unfortunate trend we talk about is the second round is almost like it's like a death trap for the Astros. They just haven't found success with that pick. What did you like about Wes Mendez and his possible fit within the organization? And can you talk about his changeup as well? Because we've heard that it's possibly one of the best in the entire draft.
Yeah, and don't short sell the sweeping slider either. It's a big lateral tilt, above average weapon as well. Like, look, I think what gets lost sometimes in this age of velocity is funk and deception and just like quote unquote different. Like you look at what Parker Messick is doing with Cleveland, gets him to the All-Star game, doesn't throw hard, but it's weird, it's funky, it's left-handed. You look at Andrew Abbott with Cincinnati, he's an All-Star, at least I think in 2025 he was. Neither one of these guys throws hard, but they have weird angles, they have deception, they have funk, they have 3 or 4 pitches, they can make the ball dance left and right, up and down. And I think that's what you're getting with Wes Mendez. You're getting another low slot lefty, 91 to 94, going to settle in 91 to 92. The changeup is disgusting because it's launched at such a wide angle from the first base side of the rubber. It's really nasty against right-handed hitters. They swing over the top of that. They flail at it quite a bit. And then, Mendez is polished and advanced enough to throw that sweeping slider to the back foot of right-handed hitters as well, which you actually don't see that very much in college baseball. You don't see left-handed pitchers or even right-handed pitchers comfortable enough to throw the breaking ball to the back foot of the opposing handed hitter. And Mendez will do that. So, he falls to the second round because he's not a guy that was 93 to 95. But this is 3 or 4 pitches. There's a bigger 2-plane curveball as well. I would expect of all the guys in this class, just because of the weapons that he's already got and the polish that he's already got, I would expect Wes Mendez to move pretty quickly in the Astros organization. I would expect him to be at least, a couple of months into AA by the end of 2027. And Wes Mendez should be a Houston Astro in 2028.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I mean, how obviously the system's had it's been low ranked. It's been depleted quite a bit, having these extra picks, and they hopefully we'll see when the signings come out. But they kind of did what I had hoped with. You mentioned getting Hughes a little under slot, and then using that extra money to sign some high schoolers. So in the 3rd round, and then the comp pick in the 4th round, they got Keon Johnson and Bo Peterson. What do you know about those guys? And kind of what's the ceiling look like for those 2 high schoolers? I know ultimately that's kind of what you're looking at. What are you going to get from the 18-year-old you signed?
Yeah, I think Keon is among the more polished high school prospects the Astros have selected in a number of years. He's got excellent bat to ball skills. He can play the shortstop position. I watched him play second base. I watched him play third base. I think I watched him play center field last year as well. He's got some versatility. He can run a little bit. It's above average speed, It's better underway than it is out of the box. He's not going to burn up and down the first base line. But yeah, this is a gap-to-gap hitter. I think there's quite a bit of projection in his lean frame. He's got this wiry strength to him. Never really showed, at least for me, like that explosive twitch. Like he never really showed for me to be a guy that's going to develop into a lot of power. Probably going to be a hit over power profile, but that's okay because he can really kind of splash the ball. With Dyken Park, you never want to take away a power potential from a right-handed hitter, right? I mean, this is a guy that could end up hitting 20 home runs because he plays in Houston. So a sum of his parts type of player. Don't know if there's a carrying tool, but don't know if there's a necessary weakness either. Just a really good, sound baseball player that if he continues to show the versatility that he showed last summer, maybe he ends up as a Mauricio Dubon type of a player. I think he's probably got a little bit more power potential than that, but that's kind of like the archetype, at least in Houston, that you'd be familiar with.
Yeah, no, it sounds, and the Astros, it seems recently have really gone maybe power over hit, and they don't have a ton of high hit tools. So getting a Logan Hughes, getting a Keon Johnson, and then a couple of the other guys we'll probably talk about here in the first 10 rounds. But Bo Peterson was one that I was intrigued on just from what I read on your site and on Pipeline and Baseball America. Almost like maybe similar to Xavier Nines last year, where he's a big bat from the left side. Probably not as much power, but potential to potentially add some more, and then pretty solid at third base. But what's your take on that? I know he was ranked pretty high, kind of by all three of y'all.
Yeah, I had Bo Peterson as like a 4th or a 5th round pick, maybe a 3rd round pick. He was a guy that at the end of last summer was being talked about as a top 50 pick, a potential comp A pick. And it just didn't happen for him this spring. I mean, he didn't take a step. The athleticism didn't trend up. The power, I think everyone's expecting the power from Bo Peterson. It's 6'3", it's 210 pounds. It's a big physical frame, rounded off shoulders. He's broad. Like you expected this guy to grow into a good amount of slug. And, from what I heard, I didn't get to see Bo Peterson this spring because he's on the East Coast. I heard he was still kind of having trouble get to the pull side, having trouble getting the barrel out. There's more ground balls than you want to see. And the overall raw strength just didn't trend in the direction that I think people were expecting it to or wanting it to. That being said, Bo Peterson is pretty young for this draft, and I think he's going to have a chance to get into a pro system, get into some development and training with a pro system, pro nutritionist, pro strength training, and rework that swing a little bit, rework the approach to where he's actually getting into his strength. But that was my biggest question as we got to July. It was like, okay, if this guy has kind of stalled out a little bit from his junior summer to his senior spring, where the competition gets worse, what's the direction that this is going? So it's a sweet left-handed swing. It's a ton of end zone coverage. He swings at the right pitches. He makes a ton of contact. There's obviously raw power potential in there, but there's going to be some tweaks and some tinkering that needs to take place for him to get to it. So for now, at least for now, it's more of a hit over power, opposite field gap type of a hitter. I don't expect it to remain that way. I expect him to turn into a slugging third base archetype.
From the first 10 rounds, like just looking back at it now, who was another player that we haven't named yet that intrigued you the most by possibly the best fit in the org, just on ideologies that the Astros currently run on? And could I interest you in talking about Cam Durnan a little bit, since I am a Missouri graduate?
Are you? Yeah. Cam Durnan, I mean, I've said this. Cam Durnan was one of my single favorite picks in this draft of any team. I had Cam Durnan as a 2nd round value. I thought he belonged in the 2nd round. I think is a surefire shortstop among the likes of Carson Kearse and Tyson LeBlanc that went in the 2nd round. Cam Durnan hasn't played very much college baseball because he was hurt. He was recovering from Tommy John in 2025, but you could really see that strength and that muscle atrophy like wane away when the 2026 season was like, into the month of April. He was really beginning to show some of that strength. My only thing with Durnan that I'm a little concerned about is it's not the most adjustable swing. He's a little bit stiff in the box. So when he does expand the zone, which I have to note is rare, he's got great pitch selection and he's got a good approach. But when he does expand the zone, there's some stiffness in his hands and there's some things in his lower half that don't allow him to make contact and fight deeper into at-bats. So that all being said, I mentioned Tyson LeBlanc. I mentioned Carson Kearse. I think those guys have a better chance of ending up at 2nd or 3rd base than Durnan. Like, I think Durnan has a chance to be a legitimate above average shortstop that hits 12 to 15 homers and takes his walks and runs a healthy batting average. And he already understands how to get to the pull side and find the barrel, which is going to work awesome at Dyken Park. It's an SEC performer. He had a good year this year. He was really hot in Omaha. I didn't see too many holes to poke in Durnan, with the exception of, having some swing and miss on pitches outside of the zone, which is the meta in Major League Baseball. So many guys that chase, get their A swings off and don't make contact on those pitches anyway. So I thought it was one of the steals of the draft. He belongs in the second round. I expect him to. I expect him to take over for Jeremy Pena when the control years for Pena end. And I think this is going to be your shortstop of the future.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I'm super pumped. I know Kenny was. That was probably his favorite pick, and probably will be for a long time. Kind of moving on to the back end of the first 10 rounds. The Astros, I feel like they had a type when they went pitching. Riddell was 6'5", 250. Gavin Eddy, 6'5", 225. Michael Adari, 6'6", 225. Brian Carney, 6'6", 210. What's your take on that? I know a lot of what I read was great extension. All these guys have great extension. They're huge. They get downhill. But what's your thought on that as a kind of a philosophy, I guess?
Yeah, like when you look at the starting pitchers in Major League Baseball, a lot of them have one thing in common. They're very big and they all have great extension. It's hard for you to find a starting pitcher, specifically a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball with middling extension that doesn't have an absolutely elite fastball. And if you have middling extension but an elite fastball, you're going high in the draft. If you have a middling fastball and you have elite extension, you're still going to go in the top 5 rounds, and they're going to hope to build a fastball for you. So all of these players have that in common. They all move really well. They all have spin capacity. They can all rip a breaking ball. And if you believe that they can improve velocity and they can improve stuff even slightly, these guys all fit, in the top 10 rounds of a draft. I think Adari is one of the most interesting names in this class because he's got size. He's 6'6", he's 220, but he's also kind of a low launcher. He's got 5 pitches. The fastball really tails and sinks to the arm side. He pairs a more traditional sinker and a changeup off of that. The changeup is more of like a cutter changeup, and then he's got the sweeper, which, as we know, the Houston Astros love a sweeper, right? So I don't know if Adari profiles as a starting pitcher for Houston out of that grouping, but I think he's going to be a really nasty leverage reliever that can be deployed in like the 7th inning. So the Astros know, one thing and one thing best. Starting pitchers in this league, leverage pitchers in this league, they all move well. And all of the guys that Houston ended up selecting move well. They have good extension. And I think that's going to lean well towards their development.
Turning to the final 10 rounds of day 2, and still always going to say day 3, but the Astros took 2 more prep bats in Jack Beck and James Tronstein. And, talking to scouts, Tronstein looks more like that backup plan if some of those guys at the top of the draft didn't sign. But from what you've seen from Beck, what is there offensively? And he was a guy who had a pretty big combine performance as well, right? That boosted that value.
Came out of nowhere. He was not on the circuit last summer. I was all over the country last summer. I'm going to be all over the country this summer. And sometimes there's just guys that for one reason or another don't make a travel ball team, don't go to tournaments, don't go to showcases. Jack Beck is one of them. And if he did, I totally missed him because he is a guy that when he gets off the bus, he's a pro. I mean, he is huge. He's 6'3", 220, and it is strong. It's not, it's not bad weight. Shows up to the combine, parks a bunch of balls into the seats. One of the more inspiring batting practice displays from a power perspective that I had seen at the combine, especially because it was a guy that I didn't really know or recognize. And so you back pocket that, and then you go, okay, there's a reason I haven't heard of this guy, right? Like, we're going to watch him do infield drills, and he's clearly going to be a first baseman. He's clearly going to be like a heavy-footed right fielder. Not the case. Like, they put him at shortstop. He's got some balance. He's got the ability to kind of stop his momentum. He's got plus arm strength. I don't think he's a shortstop, but I do think he's a third baseman, and I think he could be a pretty damn good one. So certainly power, certainly a powerful arm. He's pretty big for an 18-year-old, a young 18-year-old. So he's going to have to watch his fitness. He's going to have to watch his strength if he wants to stay on the dirt, but a really good athlete for his size and has the ability to impact the game. So I was hearing coming out of the combine, because he was foreign to a lot of teams, yeah, 600K, 700K, 500K from some teams. It wouldn't surprise me if he got a little bit more than that, because it seemed like there was a little bit of a bidding war and teams really liked him after the combine.
Yeah, I feel hopefully we'll see when they all come out. Feel good if they end up signing Johnson, Peterson, and Beck, and it makes kind of a nice crop of young talent in the system. But I know this will be a little more difficult. I mean, I saw you did 613 draft profiles, so hopefully some of these guys are on there. But looking at the final 10 rounds outside of Beck and Tronstein, which I know is not likely to get signed, was there a pick that you really liked by the Astros? Anyone that kind of stood out?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I mean, Peyton Fiend barely missed my board, but if you did the mock draft simulator, you can draft him. He was in there. Owen Novak, I think, is really interesting from Middle Tennessee State. Didn't make the final board, but one of the toughest guys to strike out in college baseball. Doesn't have a lot else going for him. Like, he's not the most dynamic defender. There's no power, but the bat to ball skills are so annoyingly pesky that he feels like a guy that's going to play off of the bench as a fourth outfielder for Houston or for another team at some point. And he's just slappy. He just kind of keeps the game in motion. Conga line guy. Rayshawn Galloway, I talked about Galloway a little bit in my AL West draft grades podcast that went out last week. He's tough because, like, the data is so big. The data is so loud. I don't think he's a catcher. I think he's a left fielder or a first baseman if he's anything. But the bat to ball was so elite. The exit velos were really good. The swing doesn't look like it should work, and the athlete doesn't suggest like big league caliber dynamic prospect. But these guys that put up these massive data seasons in college baseball tend to find their way to Double A pretty quickly, and then maybe he's a trade piece, maybe he's a guy that surprises and ends up with a role on the team. So Galloway's interesting. Again, didn't make my final board. You can draft him on the mock draft simulator though. Just kind of like a one-trick pony, I guess. And then Ben Tryon was a guy that was actually ranked inside of the top 4 rounds. If you go back to March, he was like 130 on the board. Didn't have the best year, but if you're a fan of Kyle Manzardo, it's kind of who I comped him to. Didn't have the year that he had in 2025, but the swing really works. Can get to all 4 quadrants. Great pitch selection skills. He's just okay at first base, and he's a below average runner. But I think one thing that Houston did well here is they drafted guys that can really hit. Novak can really hit. Galloway on paper, on a spreadsheet, can really hit. Ben Tryon can really hit. And so I think there's some pretty good data darlings in this post 10 range that you should kind of keep an eye on. The others, I know Noah Miller. I actually don't even know who PD Soto is. That's a totally new name to me. And then Brady Thomas is a good arm out of Jacksonville State. So yeah, I gave Houston, I think, a B or a B plus for this draft because they took a lot of traits, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a path for a guy to make it to the big leagues. And everybody that I just mentioned there, they have some sort of carrying tool that can move them up the ladder.
Joe, my last question here. We talk about some of these guys getting quickly up the system and moving up. It's going to be such a crapshoot recently. The Astros' first guy to debut in the major leagues from the 2024 draft was UDFA and Lucas Spence. From some of these guys that we've talked about, in your mind, who has the best shot of playing for this Astros team as quickly as possible?
Yeah, so I think Wes Mendez is going to be the quickest mover. With the amount of polish that he has, with everything that he brings to the mound, his strike throwing ability, 4 pitches, deception. Like, I think that's a guy that has no business being in high A, or he'll show that he has no business being in high A. So I think he's going to move really quickly. I'll say this. We didn't talk about this guy. I'm a massive, massive fan of Aaron Piasecki. And I know we've talked about like 3/4 of this draft at this point. Aaron Piasecki is a legitimate shortstop. And in the same vein that Cam Durnan is a legitimate shortstop, I think Piasecki belongs at the shortstop position. He's got a slow heartbeat, really, takes his time. The internal clock is good. Arm strength is good enough. But on top of that, it's also elite bat to ball skills, good pitch selection. There's enough power to leave one into the Crawford boxes here and there. But he's 23. That's the reason that he went so far down the board is he's on the older side. So, if Piasecki goes right to high A, impresses, moves up to Double A by the end of May or beginning of June, and Houston needs a replacement for Jeremy Pena if he goes down for an injury, or Altuve if he goes down for an injury, watch out for Aaron Piasecki, because I think this is the guy that kind of hits 300 in the minor leagues every single year and gets a cup of coffee like 4 or 5 different years into his career. So good player.
All right, Joe. Well, I appreciate it. That's all we got. Man, awesome stuff. Appreciate you joining us tonight.
Of course. Yeah. Anytime, guys. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. So if you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. As always, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back for our next episode of the Astros Future podcast, covering your Astros in the minor league system.